You're listening to the Azure DevOps podcast, today featuring Lori Lamkin from Microsoft.
The Azure DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to another episode of the Azure DevOps podcast. Go online to www.azuredevops.show to see show notes and other episodes. I'm really excited today to speak with today's guest, Lori Lamkin. Lori Lamkin has been leading the Visual Studio Team Services program management since the birth of Team Foundation Server in 2002. As the Director of Program Management, she led the transition of the team to Agile methodologies, to open source reuse, to cloud services, to Azure, and to cloud services. Lori, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I want to first apologize for my horrible husky voice. It's been pretty smoky here in Seattle from the wildfires, and I guess it just affected me, and it's just affecting how I'm talking. So apologies for that.
Oh yeah, but thank God you weren't affected in a real sense. It's terrible. Those fires are raging.
I know, exactly. I certainly count my blessings that way.
Definitely. Well, I've been so excited to record this interview with you because you have been a mover and a shaker for, 16 years in the whole space of shipping software better using Microsoft technologies. And now we have Azure DevOps services, Azure Cloud. I mean, way back in 2002 when it first started, .NET was just getting started.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting space to be in. For people who know me, the things that really speak to me are I like to collaborate and get people to collaborate together to get stuff done. And it's been a wonderful journey because that's my passion. It's what I enjoy doing. It's what I get to do every day in my role as director of PM. And it's also what the product does. Like I get to build tools to help others get people to collaborate together and to deliver software. And it's been amazing. The industry has had tons of innovation. So it's been a lot of learnings, a lot of new things to come together and figure out how to best get things done, and that have really changed how people deliver software over the years.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly been fantastic to see over all of this time. So just a few weeks ago, there was that huge announcement of the restructuring of the entire VSTS product and breaking it up into different pieces and shifting it, and now it's dev.azure.com and Azure DevOps services. That's a huge fundamental change there. Would you mind sharing what was just at the beginning, the strategy that led to this big shift?
Yeah, sure. It feels like a big shift potentially, in terms of how we talk about the product or how you might acquire the product. But our goal since the very beginning of TFS was that we integrate with the ecosystem of the rest of what comes together for your application lifecycle at that time is what we called it. And so we know that while it's great to provide an integrated suite of tools that works end to end, so you have what I call the easy button, hey, just let me do it, and figure it out for me. We have that. And that's been the primary way we've talked about the product. But we've always been able to allow you to mix and match our tools with different, work item tracking systems like Jira or different CI/CD systems and like Jenkins. And we've allowed people to do that, but people didn't know. And because we kept talking about it as a suite of TFS or VSTS, people would be like, they just assume you had to use all of it. So to me, our strategy has always been to embrace the heterogeneity that exists in the real world and to allow you to use pieces of our solution if you prefer to customize your own journey. Just this is more of an effort to raise the awareness that that capability is there and also make it really a lot easier to just adopt a piece of VSTS and just use the CI/CD system with the rest of your stack that you use for DevOps.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you've been with the group through Visual Studio Team System and TFS and then VSTS and all that, and now you've left it in very capable hands. What's next for you, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so well, I feel like this is a great time for me to try to do something brand spanking new. I've been in developer tools since the beginning of my career when I came out of college and started working at Microsoft. So I've been exploring lots of different opportunities at Microsoft. I feel like I have many choices, but at my level, they have to do a lot of org shuffling to figure out how I fit in. And that's just not something that happens in a matter of weeks. So I'm trying to be patient, which isn't my best trait. So it's exercising that. And in the meantime, I'm directing a ton of energy to cool, fun stuff at home this summer. And I've been joking with my husband that, we have a long list of stuff we wanted to get done around the house. And I look at it and go, that backlog has got some excellent velocity this summer so far due to my additional time spent. I can still complain quite a bit about the cycle time since the ideas have been on that backlog for a very long time. But yes, it's been very rewarding to kind of power through that. Although it can be a little hard on the pocketbook sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Now, is the backlog shrinking because you're knocking them out, or is it growing because you have time to think of new ideas?
I know. It's like, I cleaned the storage room, and then it's like, okay, maybe I should go through that box and throw some other stuff away. It is a little bit more things pop up, but it feels great to finally get some of this stuff done.
Awesome.
And also spend a lot more time with my kids, who I have twin boys. They just turned 16 a month ago. So I was able to help make sure they got their driver's licenses and, do some things with them this summer. They're on the tennis team. So I'm being the team mom and, some fun things that I haven't had the chance to do before. But soon enough, it's going to be time to get back to the real world of building great software customers love.
Oh, that sounds fun. Sounds like a great summer.
Yeah.
Well, there's if you look at some statistics, there's a huge influx of software developers into the industry. And of course, businesses all over can't find enough programmers of all types. And so we have this huge influx of early 20s among the developer community. And then they probably don't even know the journey that Microsoft and the whole industry has gone through with an understanding of how to take source code, organize it properly, use it properly, and then what it means to make a build, to do some quality control, like automated testing or other things, and then automated deployments is people are still adopting that. So, what would you say to the younger folks, just as far as what the history has been before Azure DevOps services, for context?
Yeah, well, it's probably a blessing not to have gone through some of that, because I think at the beginning when we did waterfall style development, it wasn't very connected with customers. You would start out with great customer connection if you were so inclined, which luckily at Team Foundation Server we really were. But then we kind of went into a little hole and built the software, and then had this grand reveal of what we call betas, and then people had to download and install, and and then that was its own process, and deploy it through their organization, get the team to use it. So it took a long time for people to start being able to give us feedback on the product. And by the time we got feedback, we were getting ready to wrap it up and call it a release and sell it to the world. And so what I would hear is people give me feedback. I'd be like, wow, that's a great idea. We'd love to do that. We'll do that in 2 years in our next product cycle.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. It's hard on the customers, although it was the norm in the day. But it was also hard on the team to feel like, every day I'm doing something that matters. Every day I'm making an impact on customers' lives, because it's really every day I'm making an impact on customers' lives years from now. And now with, being able to just use cloud services and use it real time for us to be able to deploy continuously, we can just be that much more in touch with our customers, and it makes our customers happier and our jobs so much more satisfying. So it's such a great place and time to be in the software industry, when you can feel like every day I'm having an impact.
Yeah, that's so true. Before it was hard technically just to the mechanics of putting out a release, and so you didn't even do it every week, or some people did it every 6 months or whatnot. And now the mechanics have become so easy. You can do it every day if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about that transformation, I feel like the first big pivot was moving from that waterfall mindset to agile, where it was like, hey, we don't have to deliver everything all at once. What if we just improved one thing at a time and delivered in chunks, and chunks that made sense together? And it took a little bit of a different twist in how you plan. And boy, when we first started doing that, it was really hard because people were used to planning in 6-month increments, and then to be able to say 3 weeks, it was like mind spinning. I can't figure out how do I break down this huge idea into just what I'm going to do in the next 3 weeks? And so it took a little bit of practice. But once we were able to do that, that really changed the world, because the schedule that you have is like the heartbeat of your organization. It's like everything moves along on that sort of cadence. And when you change that, a bunch of other systems have to change too. It's like, oh, how do I report progress? And how
Yeah.
often do I talk to customers? And how often do I deploy? And all these things start coming along with as soon as you change the schedule. So I think I look at that as kind of the first big key to making a transformation is how often are you doing your planning increments? Um, yeah, and so that was, I think, key to the early part of our journey. And then we felt like we needed to do it because, of course, we're building DevOps tools. So we need to adopt the DevOps practices first so that we can learn all the ugliness and kind of flesh it out, and then be able to speak from authority and be able to build tools that help guide people down the right path.
Yeah.
The second big change is a little more challenging, and I think that one is equally pivotal, because in order to actually get your organization to fully embrace automating your deployments and fully embrace, delivering at such a rapid pace, you can't have organizations accountable for little pieces of the life cycle. So we merged our development and test disciplines into one engineering discipline. And we also brought in operations of our service into the engineering team and made engineering accountable for that full end-to-end delivery. And I tell you, when it's nobody else's problem but your own, all of a sudden the world changes. There's no throwing code over the wall to QA and sitting there and waiting, and QA being 3 months behind, and then they submit a bug and it's something you wrote code on 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have to context reset, and it's like, oh, I don't even remember what I wrote then. And so it just slows down the whole process. It's like, no, you can't really blame another team for, slowing you down. It's like, hey, we better get faster ourselves. And so there's a lot more investment into the tools and processes of how we get things done because it's completely under our control. And that's been able to allow us to deliver software a lot more frequently because it's not like you don't feel disempowered waiting for another team to figure themselves out.
That transformation that you've been through, that's such a good example for other folks because there's a lot of other companies that are not the size of Microsoft or have the investment into software to do projects on the scale that Microsoft does. And one of the questions I think a lot of people have is, what are the roles I need in my organization, and what are the ratios, and how many of each? You guys had testing completely separate, and then you had deployment and operations completely separate. And now now that the team is all together, what are the current job descriptions that you've decided to go with?
Yeah, it's a software development engineer is what it is. I mean, there's a program management team, which I run, and the program management is really responsible for the strategy of the product, the backlog. They're kind of like the product owner in Scrum. But in addition to that, they're responsible for the design of the actual customer experience. The dev team is responsible for everything else. Is the service up and running? Are there live site issues? The quality of the code being written, the architecture, the deployments, all of it. And that's really different from, okay, I write the code and architecture as a dev, and as a tester, I'm responsible for the quality. But I get a bunch of stuff thrown over to me that isn't very good to begin with. And now what do? I just have to throw it back. When one person's responsible for both of that, you can see how suddenly it's like, wow, this is really different. And then to go and say, hey, if I deploy to production and something's wrong, I'm the one who gets called at 2:00 in the morning, gets woken up, has to get up and online and fix it. And so that accountability changes everything because all of a sudden, next time I'm going to write better tests that catch these issues because I don't want to wake up at 2 in the morning. And next time I'm going to say, you know what, that deployment might not be ready, and hold it for an extra day or something because it's my accountability. And that made that whole investment into better tests, faster tests, being able to run them more frequently, being able to automate the deployment, being able to detect issues early, mitigate issues quickly. All of that came from that, hey, I don't want anything to go wrong because if it does, I'm going to have to do the reactive work. So way more fun to do the proactive work.
And with that, let's take a break for a word from our sponsor.
The Azure DevOps podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
So that's a big shift from the way that you guys and a lot of IT organizations are structured, where you have developers and then you have testers writing tests or doing manual tests. So the organization you decided to go with has the same people, the same type of developer writing the code and doing the testing. Is that right?
That's right. And, you also have to remember that with a cloud service, testing can be really different because we can deploy to just a few people. I can deploy, we have something called feature flags, which is essentially exposure control, so that I can deploy into production and only be able to see it myself, or only my team can see it, or then I can turn it on for a few customers. And so it's like you end up doing a lot of testing in production and being able to control the risk through that sort of exposure control that we have. And that puts a lot less pressure on testing in terms of I've got to find everything before the deployment goes through. If it's only going through to a couple people, it's okay, especially if they're people who want to help test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens in production can only be interpreted by somebody who has intimate knowledge of how the software is put together.
That's right. I think, what happens in production, nothing is exactly the same in a test environment as it is in production. And so,
Hmm.
and that's makes it a lot easier for us to be able to put things out into production in a very controlled manner, not affect our general customer experience, and be able to use real live production data, real live production configurations, network bandwidth, kind of all of that is right there for us, so we can be able to not try to spend all this time emulating something. It's a heck of a lot faster just to try it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So the whole industry is adopting cloud and adopting DevOps methods and practices, but you also took your group through the waterfall to Agile transition. Of course, the whole industry has gone through that as well. A lot of people say that the waterfall to Agile shift, the biggest thing was doing work in smaller chunks, or doing release in smaller chunks and doing more of them. What would you say is the biggest shift when it comes to progressing from Agile and adopting DevOps?
Yeah. Well, so that's, to me, you're right about the Agile transition. It's like smaller chunks, and that's what I call the schedule. It's like if your schedule of planning does things in smaller chunks, then all of a sudden everything else starts to flow from it. And the shift to DevOps is really about accountability. Who's accountable for the code that's in production? If it's your ops team, then your dev team is going to be light years ahead coding something else, and they're not going to be in touch with the customers and what's happening in production because they're not accountable, and they're not called in the middle of the night, and their son's birthday party is not interrupted. And so, they're perfectly moving on ahead and feeling like those slow people in production, and doing production operations. So to me, it becomes accountability. And I recognize everybody can't go and reorganize their team and take on all this additional accountability. But you can think differently as an engineer. You can say, I am responsible for this end to end, and what I'm going to be giving, into deployment, and is going to be of the highest quality that I can have. And you can take steps in that direction. But I talk to CTOs and CIOs and CEOs all the time about this journey, and they are moving towards centralizing that accountability into one discipline because of all the benefits that you get from, smoother, you're not transitioning between lots of different people to get things done. And because, it's really hard for ops teams to keep up with all the deployments and also invest in tooling to help the diagnose and be proactive. And they have huge, like I talked about my personal home backlog. I think in ops, they have, things they've thought of that would help make their jobs easier that are been on that backlog much longer, and they just don't get the time because the pace of delivery is so fast.
Yeah.
And if you realize that you can deliver even faster, if you make those investments, all of a sudden things can really change, and the morale of the team can change as well.
So everyone's a software development engineer.
Yeah.
And you used to have people who had an entire career that was software testing.
Yes.
And now you don't. Is that right?
That's right. There might be pockets. Microsoft is a huge company. So
Yeah.
we have some 80,000 engineers at Microsoft, and there might be some pockets of people who call each other testers. I couldn't say what Xbox does in detail there as an example, but predominantly we've eliminated the test discipline from Microsoft, and that transition was very challenging because what had happened at Microsoft was everybody wanted to kind of be a developer. And so it became a little bit of a second class discipline. That person might not be ready to be a developer.
Yeah.
Let's start them as a tester. And it's like, then they don't get the rigor and the training of, kind of writing code that's ready for production. And they're writing code that's for testing, and, people aren't doing the rigorous code reviews and all that of that. So some people made the transition very easily, and others really struggled with the transition, especially people focused primarily on manual testing. And so it was a painful transition, but one that we felt like was going to help the company deliver better, faster quality software to our customers. And I think we've realized that.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's probably historically been a lot of people who had the career track of systems engineer, or broadly called IT pro. Did y'all have those, or how does that fit in, or does it?
Well, no. If I go way back in time, what we would do is we deliver box software. So we would say, oh, here, let's put this TFS thing together, and then you buy it and you run it. And it's your deal.
Yeah.
You have the IT pros to go do that. Like, we don't even have those people, except in Microsoft IT. We have MSIT is what we call it. And of course, they build all the apps that we use to, do performance reviews or expense reports. And at one point in time, they ran TFS for the company. And they had IT pro, persona. I don't think they called them that. I think they still called them software development engineers. But they had that same kind of operations, operating the service for the company. And as a part of that big accountability change I was talking about, is instead of them being kind of like this distant group far off away running software for the company, we brought them in so they're part of our engineering organization. Now, we still have people that specialize in monitoring, writing the health monitors and mitigating issues and doing all that sort of tier one issue resolution that happens. And there is a set of people, but they are still part of the engineering team, so that we try to prioritize work that helps them be more efficient in our overall backlog that the entire engineering team does as a whole, versus kind of seeing it as some side team way off over in the corner somewhere that we care less about their experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your whole system runs in your Azure Data Center. So you leave it completely up to the systems engineers and the network administrators that actually work in the Azure Data Center to operate everything, and the developers are required to have a skill set that's broad enough to operate the components of Azure that the software is running on.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, of course, we build our software on Azure. And so if there are issues deeper inside of Azure, SQL Azure, or networking or whatever, we need to be able to narrow down the problem. But then we get on, when there's an issue in production, we create a bridge, and we can pull in people from our dependent components onto that bridge to help us diagnose the issue. Okay, this looks like we're having a networking issue, or this looks like it's an upgrade is happening in a certain data center. This is a localized problem, and they can help us. So it's not like we're isolated to ourselves. It's the whole company trying to come together to make the customer experience great for all of the services that are running on top of Azure. And if there are issues, we're all jumping in to help. Lots of times there are vice presidents on those bridges, as well, trying to make sure that we're clearing out, any issues as quickly as possible and getting all the experts on the phone to mitigate things as quickly as possible for the best customer experience on Azure.
Yeah. At some point, I think there's going to be a historian who's going to analyze the last few decades and put that into the history of computer science. I think a lot of people in the computer science curriculum learn about the mainframes of yesteryear and all those other things. But now we have some era where the whole industry had decided to separate into groups. And now the industry, I think with Microsoft and other companies leading, has decided, no, we're just going to have one group.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's really, really different. And I think there's also much more, the business is much more competitive. Customers expect a heck of a lot more. They expect value being delivered faster. And I think it makes the leaders in the organization talk to customers a lot more, be much more in tune, and do things like I remember having bugs that would get ping ponged back and forth between, oh, is this a bug in Windows? No, it's a bug over here, and like different teams would do that. And it's like 3 months later, the bug still isn't fixed. Now you're talking about VPs getting on a live site bridge and fixing this sort of thing in a matter of minutes. Like there's that time to delivery and the customer expectation has made, everyone sit up and take notice and role model how important customers are and how important their experience is. And we prioritize that above, new feature development. It's like, what's the experience today is way more important than what we're going to be delivering tomorrow.
Yeah, when we were mentioning that, I remembered reading a story from the mid 90s book called Microsoft Secrets of doing Microsoft Office in, 1994, 1995. And some of that was in some of those stories.
It's very old school. It's been very refreshing to see, and it just feels like you can get so much done, much less log jams and red tape. It's like, everyone's kind of trying to get through the issues. And frankly, our, DevOps tooling has helped with that a lot because, there's transparency across organizations where you can see what people are working on. It's easier to hand off issues.
So Satya has a culture change that he's driving, and then there's also an initiative behind something called One ES. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, I think this has been kind of Satya's stamp that he's put on Microsoft has been, the growth mindset and, clarity in leadership. And he's really trying to kind of modernize Microsoft, be open and work great with, the whole industry and partnership and a lot, embrace open source and a whole bunch of different things he's done to really modernize Microsoft as a company. And as a part of that, he's observed we have hundreds of thousands of people working here, and every organizational leader can create their own team and their own subculture, and it's really hard then to work across teams when we use different tools and different processes and have different values. So as part of this whole culture change, he's invested heavily in what we call the One ES, or the One Engineering System at Microsoft. So a standard set of tools, practices, and cultural values that we can rely on to help us go through our own DevOps transformation as a company to deliver value to customers more frequently. And the backbone of the One ES is Azure DevOps, or Visual Studio Team System, whatever you want to call it these days.
Yeah.
And that backbone, people have been adopting that. Of course, we're talking about a bunch of divergent backgrounds and people who've been shipping software for 30 years plus, and old code bases and build systems and scripts that people are afraid to touch, or, spaghetti code and, kind of all of that. So, and then brand new spanking new web services and cloud services that are, lightweight and containerized and, all that. So we have the full spectrum of types of apps and services that we build and state of code base. And so adopting to Azure DevOps has been a journey that's different for every team at Microsoft. And the approach has been, okay, what's most painful to you? And what are you seeing that you need to fix? And okay, well, that sounds like it's your build system. So let's get you on a great CI/CD pipeline. Or, the first thing that we started on about 5 years ago was really about planning and the Agile transformation across the company. So at this point, really the whole team is using the Azure DevOps Agile tooling. And then the next thing was Git as a version control system.
Yeah.
We had some proprietary internal systems. We had some use of our centralized version control system, TFVC, but no real standardization. And that makes it hard to share code and components across the company, and let alone learn from each other. And the industry's moved to distributed version control, and Git's where it's at. And kids come out of college and they know Git, and and now they have to learn something new and different. Well, that's just silly. So we've adopted Git pretty much across the company, and there's some great stories online at aka.ms/DevOps that are about even the Windows team's journey. You can imagine terabytes of source code being stored in Git, and they're the world's largest Git repo out there.
Amazing.
And they're able to use Git at scale for an organization and a code base that large. So we've had some great innovations to try to make sure DevOps can come to the small weight, lightweight, modern apps and services, as well as even the largest, most enterprise-ready code bases we've got.
That's amazing how large the Windows code base is, and it's the largest Git repository in the world. Wouldn't that say that there's no other piece of software in the world that then you could say, oh, Git can't handle this?
Well, that's what we think. We'll find out, as more and more people start using our Git solution within Azure DevOps. I think, we're ready to take issues. So send them our way and tell us if you run into anything. But we're continuing to work on scale improvements because, performance is a never-ending process. It can never be fast enough for engineers. So we work very closely with the Windows team to understand where they see things are slow from their own engineers' experience, and we're constantly rolling out scale improvements.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, how can our listeners get going with taking advantage of what DevOps thinking can do for them?
Yeah, well, so I mentioned it briefly, but there's a site, aka.ms/DevOps. And from there, you can see our journey. There's many videos and articles that we've done on our transformation to Agile and to DevOps, and other teams at Microsoft, as well as case studies from other companies to learn from, as well as you can learn about Azure DevOps itself, the product, and what we have to offer there to help give you that easy button, as I was talking about. If you just want to get started and have it all fit together for you based on proven best practices, that's the best way to go.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lori, for visiting with me.
Great. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
And until next week, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.